equitably, because I just feel like, I think a technical dictionary definition of equitably is fair and impartial. So justice would be meted out in a fair and impartial manner. We all agree on that, of course.
Excellent.
But the problem is the subcommittee will examine strategies used by state and local governments to ensure that law enforcement entities effectively and equitably. I don't
see any law enforcement disagreeing with that, because that's the way they do their job.
Okay.
Good officers do their job that way,
Sure.
including whether they are brass or whether they're the man or woman on the street. That's how they do their job.
Let me yield to Mr. Bishop.
That exchange right, there was a masterclass in exposing word games. Democrats tried to sneak ideology into law enforcement policy using a feel-good buzzword, and Republicans shut it down in real time. Calm, sharp, and surgical. This is what happens when common sense meets DEI nonsense. If you caught it too, hit like, subscribe, and stay right here. Let's watch the full clip before I give you the full breakdown.
I actually wanted to ask Ms. Jackson Lee a question, but I know she's going to greet her friend, and that's okay. Without a microphone, we can always hear your voice. It's fine. I do have great respect for Ms. Jackson Lee. She is my friend, and I believe you're bringing this amendment in good faith, and I appreciate that. But I do have a genuine question. It seems to me that the amendment is somehow implying that if there's a rise in crime in rural areas, that would not be considered by the subcommittee. And I want to tell you, also in good faith, that is not the intention of this language. The reason that, again, these are illustrative examples of what these subcommittees would be looking into. They're not exhaustive lists. And the reason it says examine the causes of rising crime in urban areas is not to suggest that rising crime in the rural areas would not be important or considered, but just acknowledging the fact that it is widely recognized, and national polling acknowledges, I won't cite them because every poll says the same thing, people are greatly concerned about what's happening primarily in the urban areas and in the cities. And I shared some of the statistics earlier, and I won't belabor the point or take time for it, but just one headline: 9 cities reached record homicide rates in 2022. And it also corresponds to the staffing shortages that are plaguing police departments. And so that seems to be worthy of merit of the subcommittee to look into. But the question I had is, I think I'm fine with that, actually, but later you say you add the word equitably, and I'm wondering, and I'm not trying to, I really want to know, what is that term, how would you define that term? What does that mean exactly?
I'm glad you asked the question, because I'm sure you're trying to maybe infer, and I certainly will have another amendment dealing with DEI, with diversity, equity, and inclusion. But this is not the case. Obviously, as a ranking member of the crime, former chairwoman of the crime committee, I want to make sure that every neighborhood sees a law enforcement officer. I mean, there are neighborhoods that are less financially secure who want to be protected. And as officers go throughout all neighborhoods, they have the skills to be able to respond equitably. Suppose they come on a mental health crisis. And I've always said that they do more than they should be doing. We should have support systems. But let's make sure the mental health crisis is treated the same way, obviously, with the protection of officers as it would be in a higher income area. So just equity, just let them be everywhere, but let it be done equitably. And let me just say this, you're right, it doesn't preclude, but then what is the downside of using in the title rising in urban areas and rural? And just to cite a dear friend, Speaker McCarthy, who wanted to emphasize the increase in crime in some of these areas, but let me be very fair. His city will go unnamed, but the murder rate there in 2021 was 11.91 per 100,000. It was double the murder rate in New York City, 5.55, and San Francisco, 5.6.
Okay. I'm running out of time, but I appreciate that.
All right.
I'm really more concerned. I'm less concerned about adding the rural areas. I'm more concerned about the equitably, because I just feel like I think a technical dictionary definition of equitably is fair and impartial. So justice would be meted out in a fair and impartial manner. We all agree on that, of course.
Excellent.
But the problem is the subcommittee will examine strategies used by state and local governments to ensure that law enforcement entities effectively and equitably. I don't see any law enforcement disagreeing with that, because that's the way they do their job. Okay.
Good officers do their job that way,
Sure.
including whether they are brass or whether they're the man or woman on the street. That's how they do their job.
Let me yield to Mr. Bishop.
I wonder if I might have a suggestion that would solve this problem for the points that were just made by Mr. Johnson and the amendment sponsor. How about the word impartially?
There you go.
In other words, the problem that we have is that, as you said, you made reference, Ms. Jackson-Lee, this issue, the sort of rhetoric of today of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the use of the term equity implying that there should be different applications of law. I think the definition Mr. Johnson suggested and you embraced would be perfect. So if it should read not effectively and equitably, but ensure that law enforcement entities effectively and impartially serve their communities, I would be able to support your amendment.
I agree with that entirely, and I think that's a good faith suggestion.
Well, since there are Texans in the room, I've always come to understand that impartial is fair and just. And so Mr. Bishop comes to a point of bringing a Texan and a Louisianan together. We're already neighbors. And I will accept the gentleman's friendly amendment of impartial as it equates to fair and just.
See, we can all get along.
We can all get along. I'd like my amendment to be accepted with the simple.
The gentleman's time has expired. I just want to make sure I understand. The subcommittee will examine strategies used by state and local governments to ensure that law enforcement entities effectively and fairly and impartially serve their commitments. That no fair?
No,
I thought that's what equitably meant when Mr. Johnson defined it. He said fair and impartial.
You don't have to say it. It's effectively and impartially, sir, Chairman. And I just put the legislative history on the record.
Communities in that local process effectively and impartially enforce the law. Okay, we got two impartially. Substitute for the word equitably
So it's effectively and impartially. Yes, sir.
All right, without objection, the amendment is amended. The question stands on the gentlelady's
Now
amendment.
let's talk about what actually happened, because this was beautiful to watch. The Republican side didn't yell, didn't posture, didn't insult anyone. They did something far more dangerous to Democrats. They asked for definitions. And that's where the entire thing unraveled. The moment the word equitably came up, the alarm bells were ringing. Everyone knows what that word has been turned into politically. It no longer means fair under the law. It's been weaponized to mean unequal treatment justified by ideology. And Republicans weren't about to let that slip quietly into the language governing law enforcement. Not today. What made this exchange so devastating is that Democrats were forced to admit the truth out loud. When pressed, even they had to concede that what they meant was fair and impartial. And the second that admission happened, the entire justification for using the word equitably collapsed. If you mean impartial, then say impartial. Law enforcement doesn't operate on vibes, slogans, or academic theories. It operates on equal application of the law. And here's the humor in it. Republicans didn't even oppose the amendment. They improved it. They stripped out the ideological fluff and replaced it with plain English that every American understands. Fair, impartial, equal. That's justice. That's policing. That's the Constitution doing laps around modern buzzwords. The Democrats tried to pivot, tried to soften it, tried to pretend it was all just semantics. But semantics matter when you're writing law. One word can change how policy is enforced, how officers are trained, and how justice is delivered. Republicans knew that, and they refused to let DEI creep into law enforcement through the back door. In the end, even the amendment sponsor had to accept the Republican correction. That's not obstruction, that's leadership. Calm, principled, and focused on reality. This wasn't about urban versus rural or tone or intentions. It was about keeping the law blind, not ideological. Republicans won this exchange not by force, but by clarity, and that's exactly why it stung.